So most of us know that AI has been the forefront for the last couple of years. But where do you see the biggest challenge? And I think I'll probably touch upon, come back to you. So where do you see the challenge with, since you've been working on the medical industry? What has been the biggest challenge for you? Right. So I think, and that has been the core of this talk, is because while the agentic AI workflows, the AI systems have been developing, at the core there is a huge problem that we have a lot of unstructured data, and I think we are building a lot of more ecosystems to derive meaning out of those unstructured data, but make it more meaningful. Those AI systems to make it more interpretable, understand that, make it more context aware. And what I'm going to run through this particular conversation is actually to identify a couple of tools and frameworks that are available in the market, what probably can address some of those challenges probably that you're looking for, whatever you're working at. But the attempt is to look at what's in the ecosystem, where do we need to focus beyond just building AI orchestration systems, but come back to you and create more meaningful data, which I think is very much core for all of these. Yeah. I have more than about 2 decades of experience, but my landscape again has been working through retail, automotive, healthcare. But I think one thing has been very core to all my learnings, right? So that data still is very pivotal to all of the systems or products that you're developing. Unless you make data more meaningful for these ecosystems or systems that you're building, it'll never give you that value chain that you're able to accomplish. And I think even at Wells Fargo, that is what we are trying to accomplish, right? So not just building AI systems, but making sure that data is more meaningful for those AI systems and derive more insights. Okay, so I know this is something very, very, very common, but how many of you must have been using this on a day-to-day basis? What do you think is the volume of data at your enterprises which is unstructured? And I know this is just a ballpark estimate, but I'm sure this is ever growing. True. And yeah, and like I said, there was a Gartner report which was about a couple of years back, which said it's about 80 to 90% in most of the organizations. But with the volume of data that is happening or growing through this last few years, it's just exploding. And I think the volume of data that is exploding has been already always on the unstructured data. And I think that's where we need to ensure that the unstructured data has been more meaningful, has able to actually derive more value for it. Okay. So now why do you need to focus on unstructured data? I think it's very important that you actually look at this unstructured data, classify that, structure it so that it has more meaning to the systems that can derive insights out of it. The most important thing that goes in not just the order of the data that has been, is that actually acts complementary for all of these AI systems, right? So now all this information goes back to your AI systems or document systems or any of the intelligence systems that most of you are working on. But it's important that the data is most specifically retrieved or documented for that purpose, that it can be more meaningful at. So now obviously you need to make sure that in all of these processes, you build a huge and important growing context-aware knowledge base. Unless you do that, it's never going to be making sure that you lose out information, not just make out that, okay, are you able to track back where this information is coming? While I have been working with Wells Fargo, it's very, very important that I don't lose track of where this information is coming, and especially where it is needed for a lot of compliance, even in the case of medical, right? So you're tracking back information of patients, which probably goes back in years. It's very important that you make sure that your knowledge base is not point-picked, but actually is deriving back a lot of trail. Obviously, the most important thing that I think is all the focus that you might see in the most of the conversations or the talks that is coming through is we want to make sure that the data that we are exposing through these agents or workflows is compliant to the enterprises that we are trying to cater to. Okay. So, but where do we see challenges, especially that we know that AI systems are developing and evolving very rapidly? But how is this problem not small, right? This is a problem that has been probably there for decades. And this is a data that probably has started with invoicing data, volume data, policy data, medical data. And I think this is a data that has been always available. But why is that has been still a challenge for AI systems? I think one of the important aspects where that has actually been the biggest challenge is the variability of data. one invoice may not be the same, one contract may not be the same, one medical health record may be not the same as the other one. The other one, I think that there have been OCR systems which have been used across organizations in the past. Again, they cater to only specific set of documentations and may not be able to actually provide accurate information all the time. And I think it's most important that you actually just not use one or two frameworks for all of this, but look at an amalgamation of how you can embed multiple frameworks or tools into all of this context. Okay, so this is where I would want to introduce something called Docling. This is an open source based tool which was envisioned by IBM. But the reason why I want to bring Docling to this whole conversation is one, it is open source. But most importantly, this fits into the game where you actually cannot go to cloud, right? For example, you have a lot of compliance requirements. You may not want to go to the cloud. You may not be able to send a lot of private data. So what are the options for me that I can look at my data being more consistent, stays put through in your ecosystem, but I also have all the feasibility that probably a cloud environment gives me. And is this really heavy on your CPU or GPU? You will be really fascinated to see that most of the research that has been done in this space, they have done it on the CPU racks. So it's great that these guys are doing something very lean, but it's all comprised in a single pack. So you can actually install it on your MacBook M2 and M3, run this whole ecosystem as a rack. And if time permitted, I have a demo. Unfortunately, I have to swap it, but I actually had a rack-based demo which you can actually run it out of your laptops. So that's the beauty of this. So now why am I focusing on all of this? Like I said, the first important thing that's missing or something that has been focused for not just Google's Document AI or Tesseract or all of these things is building that context awareness or semantic building. And I think that is where IBM's focus when they started building Docling is to make sure that they're not looking at parsing as the main feature for Docling, right? So they wanted to make sure that they build a knowledge base. These data, whatever they're trying to build, is more context-aware, semantic approach. And that's where they started. So the other thing is obviously that adaptive learning. And I think this does not go away from any of the large language models or the most modern AI system architectures. They are making sure that this is adaptively learning. And whenever they are actually documenting or parsing any of the documents, it's adaptively learning, saying that, okay, now I have one of these templates. I mean, looking at invoice from a US geography, but how does it differ from an invoice that is coming from a UK geography? Is it different or are there language constraints? How do I adapt this? Am I able to leverage this knowledge across when I'm actually building consumer base, or am I looking at agents serving multiple regions? So it wants to make sure that this knowledge base is adaptively learning and quickly growing. So now the best part of being open source is the flexible configuration. So apart from the parsers that they have inbuilt, they are actually have a huge integration of parsers that are already available. And I'll probably also run through that why is this going to be one of those prominent things that is coming through Docling as an offering. It was a little surprising also that when Docling was actually open sourced, I think about October or November last year, it was one of those open source reached which are 10,000 Ks in just a month. So I think that it was one of the top performers open source even in the last year. Yeah. Okay. So this is a quick snapshot while I've spoken about how does Docling perform with traditional orchestration systems or the OCR. I think it's still traditionally has been able to give out 60 to 70% accuracy because I think it's still constrained with the type of formats that it's right now catering to. Regex, again, Regex is probably very, very text-oriented. You're really able to look at text-specific data, not necessarily tabular data, graph data, that right now you have a huge set of documentations that are coming through. And I think that is where Docling conventionally moved in from not just text parsing or table parsing or visual data parsing. It's actually trying to cater to all of the formats. So while they started from pre-ADF, you will be surprised in the last couple of months, they have been able to cater to most of the Office suite. So whether you take your presentations, whether you take your web documents, you take your PDFs, you take your Excels, it's able to extract information and correlate that information across all of this. And that's the adaptive learning that they've been focusing on. Okay, so this is a quick snapshot on the landscape where they're competing again, but I would not say, okay, why are they competing against document AI, which is probably the forefront in the cloud, right? But again, I think the reason why they're focusing on this niche space is you have a lot of cloud specific components, and the other end where you have a very niche area which can be deployed, like Marker and all of that, which you can deploy it on-prem. But there is a huge gap between how do I balance between on-prem and a cloud? Can I get a more reliable, more scalable? And I think that's the focus where Docklin has been focusing in the last couple of years. Okay, so it's a pretty simple thing. So I think the first and primary focus that they wanted to do is actually look at a lot of document pre-processing. It's not very different. If you have been in the data world, you understand most of these steps. But what does it start with? I think what the first thing that they start doing is they have their in-house model called the doc layout, which helps you do a lot of document layout analysis. Once they do this is where they create a unified data model called the doc model. Now, what happens through this? Once they analyze this, they get the metadata for the document, your author, your publisher, and everything. So, but then obviously that's when they actually start analyzing and applying multiple models. So what are the characteristics of my data? Do I have textual data only? Do I have tabular data? Do I have graphics? Do I have any other charts? So I think that is where it actually amalgamates with a lot of these additional ones. The most important thing is, I think, the table format that they have actually plugged in to actually detect the table data. And I think that's been most of the cumbersome part in the earlier ones, where they even look at document AI, which works perfectly, beautifully fine, but you are looking at template consistency. But I think with Docklin AI, they have used something called table former, which actually helps you even with the variable data formats, right? So the other one is called the vision former, which primarily looks at your other textual or visual data which is present, whether it is your charts, whether it's your graphics, or anything that is embedded within your document. So some of these are something that has been by default plugged in. So once your document layout analysis is being done, is where you plug in your multiple of these data. So now once I have all of these models data coming in is when you actually start building your knowledge base and creating your semantic annotation. So I would make sure, okay, where is this data coming in? Where is this part of the data coming in? Am I able to derive meaning for this part of a document to the next chart? So when tomorrow, when my agent is trying to look at a particular policy document or a contract document or probably a medical health record, can I go back and say, okay, can I give me a very specific thing? Because most of us are using a natural language to query these documents. So making sure that these contextual data are synced up is the most next important thing. So in the processes where they are actually also building about the knowledge graph. So they also have their own knowledge graph, which is also part of the open source. I will show you a quick snapshot of that. But if you don't want to use that, you can actually plug in with your existing knowledge graphs as well. So now once this is there, so once you have your document data model set up, it helps you interpret in multiple formats. So now what is the important formats that you probably look out? So one is called the Markdown, which is very much human readable. And the other one is where you want to do a lot of A-to-A interactions. That I think is again a most important part, is saying that, okay, if I want to retrieve data from one agent to another agent, or is I able to do that, is where it actually supports something called a JSON formatting. So which is a lot more comprehensive, but it's very, very applicable when you're looking at a system-to-system interaction. The last one, yes. So you have a ready-made availability to integrate with your RAG systems or your PAL systems. I have a quick demo with both LangChain, Lambda Index, couple of them if I have time to run through, but they have integration with both open source frameworks or any of the enterprise frameworks that you would wish to. Okay, so this is a quick snapshot of what I was telling earlier. So if you see on the top, this is their primary process where they look at layout analysis in terms of pre-processing. They create the table structure, assemble its data structures, build its semantic data model. So once you do that is where your Docklin model, which is a unified data model, again, proprietary to them, but you have always a provision to expand that. So that's the beauty that since it's an open source, you could extend that particular model to build your own domain modeling, right? So once you have this, you can actually export this into a JSON or a Markdown or a HTML or anything that is humanly interpretable. Or if you would want to integrate with any of the AI to AI systems, it's easy. But the beauty of all of this is I don't have to run off this into the GPU or the CPU. I can actually run this in a pure CPU environment. And I think that's the beauty that you are running through, because most of the time that you run through is like you're constrained with the ecosystem that you would want to develop. So, but I think that is where I found that this tool is very, very easy, that if I want to plug in, I don't need a GPU or a hard environment to start running. Obviously, you can start using techniques like RAGs, where you want to do a chunking, or you would want to introduce PAL, where you would want to integrate and enhance your knowledge base. But that's the integration part of it, which you can start doing. This is a little small. Okay. So these are some of those real-world applications that they have actually again published. The most important part, I think, was the invoice processing, right? While they started this whole journey with the PDF processing, but in the last couple of months, they have integrated with most of the Office suite applications, right? So you can integrate them well with invoice processing or contract processing or any of these email data detection. So now that's the beauty, right? So tomorrow, if I want to trace back and say, okay, did you raise a request for certain things and did I have an email track? I could go back and check that, right? So, and I don't have to build the specific contexts in parts. I can put all of these data back into my knowledge base and integrate it with Docklink. So now, like I said, I think the emphasis also that I wanted to emphasize is you can actually run this on-prem. So people who would want to make sure that their data is not compromised or they have a compliance requirements not to move their data to a cloud, this is a good alternative, right? So you don't have to be confined to building your own environment or building these integrations. This is going to give you a quick starter. So some of these integrations that are already in place and that are actually expanding is something that, like I said, is the Llama Index and LangChain Index if you would want to couple it with your RAG frameworks. But they also have something called B-Agent Framework, which is their in-house starter framework for building our agentic flows. So they also have something integration with Data Prep Kit. So if you want to build your knowledge base, you can integrate that with InstructLab and Data Prep Kit. So Spacie, again, I'm not going to touch upon, but they also had part of the core Red Hat Linux AI Foundation, so which is going to be one of the core offering that's going to come out. They have, again, a set of integrations. Most of you might have many of you worked with True AI. Okay. So that's also a great way to actually start building your AI agents if you're looking at open space area. So, but I think the most important thing, or I would say these things that still carry forward with Docklink, is something that you can emphasize on data quality, right? So they have a lot of grounding information saying that, am I parsing right? So how do I make sure that whatever I'm parsing, am I able to ground back onto truth, right? So that is one of those demos that I would want to fish to, that can I have a visual grounding of what I'm parsing? Because most of the times then you're looking at sensitive information or providing this information, you would want to say, okay, where is this information? And providing a visual grounding for that is very, very important. And that I think is one of those core aspects that Docklink has been emphasizing on. This is an interesting part, right? Docklink has also been in the space of generative AI. The reason is since it just not wants to use the data that has been parsing, but it can go back to your training data. You can, as long as remove the sensitive information, but that knowledge base could be used back to your training data. And that's humongous, right? So most of the time we find quality issues when we want to retrain our models for something else. So you can use that generative data using that Docklink as well and integrate back. So I have some of those metrics again, if I have permitted in another document, which actually is showing on how it fares with other open source markets, especially with Docklink. And I think at least there's been a fair amount of review that has happened, but it's at least about 90 to 95% accurate in most of the use cases. So I have a research document that I wanted to look at, which is again based out of Docklink, but I wanted to understand what are the main models that Docklink is using. So I just have built a quick demo, but it's also going to give you a grounding on what are the sections where the Docklink document is actually going to work. I just have to run it and I hope, it should be okay. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip the running. But if you see this part of it, it's actually able to focus the sections of the document on where this AI model or how the AI models are developed. So I think that's the beauty of it, because when you're actually interacting with agents or specific customers, you would want to provide a visual reference. So, and this is one of those popular and inbuilt tools that it helps you that, okay, which sections of the document actually focus on this. It's just not one, but it's running through all the document references. And actually, if I open up this research document and parallel, you can see all the same. But this is what I was talking about. So they actually have run this on Apple M3 as well as Xeon. But if you look at it, the performance has been great. Within an average about 1.3 seconds, they're able to pass a PDF and any Office document. That's a speed that they're able to run on a CPU. And I think you don't need a huge hardware if you would want to actually explore logging. So, but I would definitely recommend each of you to start, at least try giving out if you would want to look at something beyond a scalable document AI model that is available on-prem for you. That's a quick note that I would want to end. So if any of you have any questions or would like to connect with me offline, since there is not much time right now, so this is my LinkedIn handle. So please reach out to me.